future trends, deep insights, industry leaders. This is the iGaming Next podcast with your host, Pierre and Lindh.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Solutions, the leading iGaming PAM platform with a modular approach, including many benefits like a fast, secure, and scalable API-based platform, integrated with all major third-party products and services. Make sure you head over to Pragmatic Solutions and join our smart thinking.
Todd, I was going to pay the bill today, taking you here to the Mexican bar. Considering the stock movement of Evolution in the last couple of months, the times are tough, so to say. But from the last quarterly report, I don't think I need it anymore.
Business is good. Business is good. The stock price zigzags all over the place. But, we've been steady for, 25 quarters or so.
Yeah.
So, I think that's sort of predictable these days. But where the stock price goes, I have no idea. That's hard.
For sure. I mean, last time I dressed out like a flag. Now I'm dressed out like a disco ball. It's the 100th episode of the podcast.
You look like a guy in a 100th episode.
Yes,
Congratulations on making it to this point, my friend.
Thank you. And I asked our friend Carolina Palk earlier today. I told her we're going to record the 100th episode, and I just asked her for fun, like, who do you think the guest is? And she just made a very quick reply. She's like, it's Todd. It has to be Todd that we do this podcast with. And when we started the podcast 2 years ago, it's almost on the day 2 years ago the first episode was released. It was kind of like a knee-jerk reaction to COVID that had just started, and we had to pivot as an event organization to try to do something new. And it was a digital event that we launched at that time, and the podcast was a promotional tool to promote this digital event. And essentially, we did a couple of episodes, and not that many viewers in general, but I think it was the 6th episode that we did together.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And all of a sudden, the podcast just exploded. And we couldn't understand from where the engagement came. And I remember messaging Evolution, our contact there, Amy, head of marketing. We were like, have you guys promoted this podcast? Or have you guys done any marketing around this episode? And she was like, no, not really. And as it turned out, you and Evolution just happened to have this massive following that came onto the podcast.
My parents told all their friends about it, so they've got a big contingent.
Yeah. No, so essentially, that 6th episode is what kickstarted the
Wow, that's
podcast.
cool. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Did you think that you'd make it to 100 episodes? Did you view it as a project, or did you think that it was going to be a thing that was going to continue on?
No, as we spoke about here before, the funny thing was that if you go back and look to the first episodes, they are truly horrible. They are truly, really, really bad. But fortunately, no one told me that. And so in my mind, I wasn't doing a really great job with it, but it was more like a side thing, and I just enjoyed speaking with interesting people. So that was more the reason why I continue with it. But somewhere along the line, people convinced me that what I was doing was interesting to them. And so that's why I kind of continued with them, because I didn't think at the beginning they were particularly great.
There's this interesting theory, some rock and roll star put it out, and he's like, I think American Idol and these music shows, I think they're killing the music industry. Because when I was a kid, we grew up and we played in the garage and we sucked. And you know what we did? We kept playing. And then we went and played to empty rooms and we sucked. But we didn't know it. And we just kept going and going. And now these kids, they go and they get in front of a judge and they tell them, I think you're terrible. And it crushes their dreams.
Yeah.
And so you sort of had this idea, we just kept going. Luckily, no one ever told me. Now, I don't think you're probably as bad as maybe you're saying. But good job, Howard.
Yeah.
Here we are at 100.
And here we are at 100. I mean, we're going full circle today, of course. And, through the journey of iGaming Next, I mean, you were also part of our first conference in 2019, and the keynote speech that you delivered became, by far the most watched keynote speak that anyone in the iGaming industry has ever delivered. And you built a bit of a cult following, like an Evolution itself has a really cult following as well, of retail investors and so on. And so, when you walk out the street, do you get stopped from time to time by people who recognize you?
Yeah, it's a thing. You've helped to build the brand, and yeah, I was shocked how much of a reaction I got from that. And I will meet people from other industries. I've had people tell me in completely separate industries. They're like, "Oh, I shared that with our entire team, and I had them all watch it." The principles are not limited to gaming. Yeah. They work in any industry, and so it's just thrilling to hear that. The only problem is people expect the next one to be as good as that, and that's tough.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, you must experience a lot of pressure when you prepare for the next keynote, for example, because everyone. I remember at iGaming Next last year. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you thought about that, but the presenter, the host of the event, Lindh, before he went on stage, he gave this speech of in 2019, Todd Haushalter got a standing ovation, and he really hyped you up before you went on stage, and so obviously that's the expectations that everyone have on you when you go on stage, that to deliver something that is truly remarkable. Does that pressure get to you, or?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about what I want to say. I want it to be useful, and I want it to be in some watchable and something worth sharing. Yeah. And that's why my presentations usually have to do with here's some tricks that you can do, and I try to contribute something to the gaming industry. I try to leave some impression that people will be able to use back in their own companies.
Mm-hmm. I mean, another thing. It's the 100th episode, so we can look back and think back of this kind of thing that we've created now in the last 2 years. It's all the friendships that come along the way as well, and that's also a good reason why we are doing the 100th episode together today, because we kind of met each other and got to know each other through the 6th episode of the podcast, and then a year and a half ago, we did our 2nd episode, and we ended up going out having a drink afterwards. And this is one of the best things that come out of the podcast. It's a really nice friendship as well.
Absolutely. When you can make a new friend, it's hard. You get older. It's hard to make new friends that you really gel with, and you have this incredible curiosity for life. You're just always and I do too. So I always felt Elon Musk did an interview the other day. Oh, I saw it. Oh yeah, Peter Thiel said this. Oh yeah, I saw that. Oh, I read that. Oh, I'm reading this book. And oh wow, this guy's got incredible hunger for knowledge. And so you and I just we click pretty quickly. Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah, I think the something that's been really great for my own personal development, and it goes to everyone who is watching. Just the act of starting a podcast and doing these type of recordings, it forces you to stay on top of things. So, for example, when we report on the quarterly reports, it really forces you to dig into the reports in a way that I wouldn't have done if I wouldn't be forced to be put on the spot and talk about them. And similarly for just the daily movements of the world or the economy and these sort of things, because you get a little bit pressure to stay on top of things and having heard about things, because if there are certain topics that are brought up in a podcast, you are expected to be on top of a lot of the topics that are brought up. So for me, also a really great thing of running a podcast is just the fact that you have such a great motivation to learn and develop. And then also by speaking to people like yourself and others in the podcast, the exponential learning curve is incredible. So even, I read some statistic that most podcasts, something like 80% of all podcasts, they have 5 listeners a month or something like that. But even if that is true, going and starting a podcast and doing these type of interviews just accelerates the growth and personal development in a way that I've never experienced in my whole career, in my whole life before. Like the amount of development I've had in this short time has been awesome.
I mean, it's effectively a product, right?
Yeah.
So you and I are a couple of product guys sitting around talking shop, right? I mean, you gotta think of it as a product. So you gotta be current, you gotta be topical, you gotta try to make people that might be less interesting. Try to push the boundaries in conversation sometimes where people don't necessarily want them pushed, and do that in a way where you can still get them back next time as an interview. If you bring them in, put them in the hot seat, and they hate it, then it's hard to get them back again. It's a very very tricky balance, but it's been fun watching it grow. I watch the shows all the time now. I'll be scrolling through Twitter and you're doing some live thing or something like that.
It's a lot.
And now you've got events all over the world. You're invading America. New York is awesome.
So where I'm going with this tangent essentially is, of course, the question: will the Toddcast ever be born? We spoke about this.
I got a lot of thoughts about a lot of things.
Because we have a slot open at iGaming. I'm just saying, okay, if you want.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't rule it out. Like, I mean, I like chit chatting, and I like putting stuff out into the world. Like right now, my entire focus on that is putting gaming products out into the world, and I love doing that. It's not inconceivable to think that I can't wake up and go to the beach every day for the rest of my life, right? And so someday, way down the road, I could see it. Why not?
Yeah, well, the door is open. We're just
Okay,
saying.
all right.
I mean, your premiere episode was with Guy Kawasaki.
Dabbled in it. A lot harder than I realized, too. It's much easier to be interviewed than to interview. That is something I realized.
Well, it's both, I think, because it depends on the personality type, I think. As a bit of a control freak, I like to be able to control the conversation, sort of thing. Like, it makes me more comfortable. Every time I've been in your seat, I feel like it's more scary because you don't know exactly what the questions will be or where the conversation will go.
Should I be scared?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. We have an interest. I mean, Todd. I mean, you're the CPO of a multi-billion euro company. I mean, Evolution is massive. One of the biggest gambling companies in the world, and you've been climbing the ladder in your career for decades. You had a history at MGM and obviously a long career in the gambling industry from a long time. I mean, where did this ambition come from? I mean, you're in a very specific position, in a high pressure specific position. Like where? Yeah. Why do you want to? Why are you pursuing this? And where does this ambition come from?
So I mentioned to you before on the pod that when I was a little kid, I was making games in the neighborhood, and that's true. Like when I was in high school, I used to write letters they would hold these conventions in Las Vegas, Gaming, Lodging, and Leisure Summit, and they're like $1,500 a ticket. And I was like 17 years old, and I'm like, writing them. I'm like, could I come and perform work and set up chairs and stuff like that, and attend the conference in exchange for work? And I don't need to eat the food or anything. I know there's meals and stuff like that. I don't need any of that stuff. And there's this fellow named Roger Gross, and he wrote me back, and he's like, Todd, you're signed up for the conference. Enjoy. And he used to let me come to all the conferences for free. And they were like $1,500. I was this kid. I'm like 17 years old, 18 years old, 19, 20. And finished college. I moved straight to Las Vegas. I got a job. I was sitting in an interview, and this guy's asking me questions. Tell us about a time that you've had to deal with racial diversity in the workplace. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, dude, I'm like 22 years old. I have no work experience. And then this fella comes behind him, and he picks up my resume. He's like, oh, send him over to me when you're done. And it was clearly a boss. And I'm like, ooh, who is that? And there's this fellow named John Galvani. He worked for a company called London Clubs. And he brings me over, and he's like, hey, listen, I understand you're going to graduate school. Have you ever thought about dealing? And I'm like, no, I just got my degree in finance, and I want to do something a little more than frontline. He's like, Todd, you want to be in this industry? This is what you need to do, and I can offer you a job on the Strip. It would take you a decade to get to the Strip. You'd start downtown, pumping cards, and I can get you this. We're looking for young, well-spoken guys that have been to college. And so then I go through their school, their academy. We opened the Aladdin. I was a dealer at the Aladdin. It was incredible. I'm working 8 at night until 4 in the morning, making my tips. We'd take our paychecks in those days and cash them at the casinos for their paycheck promotions. It was incredible. And then I'd go home and sleep at 4 in the morning, then going to grad school during the day and all that sort of stuff. Finished that, went to the American Gaming Association of Washington, D.C. for a short stint. Bo Bernhard got me set up with a sort of externship kind of a thing. I was doing research there, and 1 block from the White House. It was incredible. Did that, came back. I'm writing letters to like all the gaming bosses. Yeah, I want to be like you someday. What advice do you have? Terry Lanny, CEO of MGM Resorts. And he got my letter. I get a call one day. I'm sitting out at my pool. Hey, Mr. Lanny would be happy to meet with you. I'm 23 years old. And he's like, yeah, he'll meet with you. This is the guy who's the CEO of the biggest gaming company, MGM Mirage at the time, office at the Bellagio. He invites me in. I go in there. I meet with him for an hour in his office, which was Steve Wynn's old office. I had my list of interview questions ready. It was so incredible. Again, I'm worthless to the guy. Like, he's not doing this there's no PR behind it, anything like that. So, he brought me in. We kept tabs. I'd send him Christmas cards every year. He'd reply.
No way.
Finally, it's time to get a job. I finished grad school. He hooks me up with the people. I get offered a job. It was incredible. All I wanted to do was work for Steve Wynn. And long answer, but it's the whole story. All I want to do is work for Steve Wynn. I'm writing the organization letters. And he had sold MGM Resorts at this time. And he had bought the Desert Inn. And he's building this new one, which would go on to be Wynn and Encore. And I'm like, I want to work with you guys. I want to work for Mr. Wynn. And my letters are being ignored. And finally, I write a letter to Steve Wynn himself. I'm like, Dear Mr. Wynn, I'm gambling now. I'm like, Dear Mr. Wynn, it is obvious to me that my letters are being ignored. I've got 2 master's degrees, and I'm willing to literally work for you for free, and no one in your organization is paying any attention to me. I doubt you have many offers like that, sir. You're my idol. I want to work for you. And as the story goes, he got the letter, and he said, the kid says they'll work for free, hire him. So I was one of the first 100 employees at Wynn. They hired me through a temp agency. Wow. Then they said, once we get the property open, we'll find a good spot for you. They offered me a job in slots or tables. And in slots had a young boss who was like early 30s. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's going to be hard to grow in that world. So I took the table games route. And it was all these gritty old veterans of the industry. All the guys from casino, they all came up like getting their hands smashed with hammers because they were card counters. Like they literally worked at the casinos where the guys in casino worked. And it was just incredible. I drilled these guys with questions. I must have asked 200,000 questions to these guys at every single lunch and dinner. I'm going on and on and on, but like every second, I read every single book in the library. About gaming. Like everything you could get your hands on that had gaming about it, I consumed it. I had and still have endless energy for the subject.
It's the obsession of something narrow like the gambling industry and putting in whatever they say, put 10,000 hours into something to become a true professional. And you put the hours in and the grit and the work in order to get yourself to the position you are today. It's difficult to take shortcuts in order to have that type of career, right? It's the grit and determination.
It's a superpower. You don't have to be brilliant or anything like that. I mean, it's useful to be smart, but if you have endless energy and passion, like that's the secret sauce, I think. That's what's going to carry you through. You'll think about everything more deeply, particularly in the products world, where it takes so little for something to fail, and it's hard to do tough new things. It's hard to do big things. You get met with a lot of resistance. Nowadays it's like, oh, everything, it's like evolution. Oh, it's a new game, but like there's a lot of fights. And it wasn't an easy run. So the passion is if you can only ask one question to somebody in a job interview, ask them, what do you love about this industry here? What do you love about this job that you might be going for?
That's true.
And the more animated they get, or the longer they talk, the more likely they are to get the job.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, to that point, I ran a LinkedIn poll the other week of asking the questions within the gambling industry, how many of the professionals actually gamble themselves in the last 12 months. How many of the professionals have actually placed a bet in the last 12 months? And 35% of all iGaming professionals have not gambled at all in the online sphere. Is that an issue, you think, for the industry, that there are so many professionals within the industry who are not gamblers or at heart, or understand gambling, or so on and so forth? Do you think?
Maybe
I wonder in the video game world how that result would be. It would probably be more like 99% play video games.
It might be a problem that they're not lying about it. They should lie. Like, if you're a professional in the gaming industry, let's switch industries. If you work for Coca-Cola,
yes,
and you take a poll of internal employees and you say, how many of you enjoy our products? I'm looking for 100%. Not because I think that people can have a healthy lifestyle and opt out of Coca-Cola, but I'm surprised you wouldn't at least lie about it. It's a white lie. It's harmless. You can say you were at a casino and you put a couple bucks on a slot machine. And the fact that they're maybe not brazen, but willing to, in a public poll, say that they haven't engaged in any kind of casino or gaming activity in the last year, is something to be said. Yeah. I don't think you would see that in other industries. The CEO of McDonald's talks about how he loves hamburgers, and that's how the game is played. Of course, it's not ideal if they don't engage with the product. Yeah. You can survive, though. You got to be flanked by people that are. Yeah. And I'm not sure that our head of accounts payable at Evolution needs to understand the nuances of blackjack or something like that. But they should feel proud about the product. It'd be cool if they did play.
Because you have guys like, the true casino enthusiasts. There aren't that many of them that are like true casino enthusiasts. But you have guys of like Kim of Casino Grounds, let's give it a spin. Yeah. Those guys within casino, they truly love the product of casino. Yeah. And they deeply understand it. Yes. Much more so than most of the professionals within the industry on the operator side certainly do.
You see it all the time, particularly in live casino, where it's all about respect and understanding players and stuff like that. There's 1,000 little things that we would never celebrate or talk about, or it's a combination. If you do that, then you need to do this, or the game becomes imbalanced, or the baccarat experience becomes imbalanced, and there's so many little things that we do that you bake into the product that you would just never catch. You have to have someone pretty close to the product. Now in product, everybody has to love the game and all that. But even then, you don't have to be a stone cold gambler to make good games. It's probably pretty rare, but and I know a lot of people, they say, that's a disqualifier and all that sort of stuff. But no, if you grew up playing video games and board games and stuff like that, you can still be a perfectly fine game maker and do okay.
Yeah, I suppose you can, yeah. I mean, taking a step back as well, you told the story of the CEO of MGM answering your letter and taking that hour. Yeah. Is that something you think about now, like when you are in a respected position in how you can lift up junior employees as well? Like, is that something?
I have never not taken a meeting with any similar scenario.
There's a lot of people who might be contacting you after this, just FYI.
Met with a dealer a couple of days ago. Tracked me down. So I got a pitch I want to make. And it's very endearing. Sometimes they put a suit on, even though it's like on Teams or something, they put a suit on, they come in, and it's a big deal for them. And I have so much respect for that. And they come in and I listen. Yeah. I listen to them. And they tell me things that I'm not thinking about. They're 23, 24. And they're not going to come in with a perfectly refined idea. But all I need is one or two zingers. I mean, what if someone walks in and gives me the next crazy time? What if someone comes in and gives the next lightning roulette or something like that? And it's unlikely, but what if maybe let's say I allocated 100 hours a year to just fielding new ideas from people. I think that's probably time pretty well spent. You also end up cultivating a culture of idea having, because people know that they have an audience for it. So so whenever anybody reaches out and they're like, hey, I'm a student and this and that, I'll pick up the phone or I'll meet with them or whatever. Yeah, I pay it forward.
I mean, in Evolution, you're the CPO, of course, but you're obviously very prevalent, very respected, and so on and so forth. Like, do you have CEO aspirations at some point as well?
No, I certainly not within Evolution. That's a very different job from my job. I have the best job in the company. At least that's my view. I have complete freedom of roadmap. You know, we don't have these like commissions of product people and you have to run things through them, and you know, like we're very fast, we're very agile. I have lots of freedom. I have complete trust. Martin trusts me, and he is insanely good. I see what he does, and it is of no interest to me. You know, he's all over the world. He is incredibly talented, and his ability to sort of shoot into an area and then understand it on a deep level, understand what the issues are, jiggle this, tweak that, challenge this person, challenge that person, move that person. Great, that department's set now. Now, where's the next problem? Oh, some compliance issue over here. Okay, what's this? And he really just does it all of which I find boring. Mm-hmm. I like product. I get to work in the laboratory. I get to be creative every day, and it's just incredible. So, you know, definitely not with any of us. You know, down the road, if there was some other thing or something like that someday, and I had to be CEO, I would do it. Yeah. But then I would be like a Steve Wynn or a Steve Jobs or an Elon type CEO, not in that caliber, but you know, they're very product focused CEOs. Yeah. And then they're flanked by these really strong COOs that run the operations. Like you run the company, I'm going to be busy with product. Yeah. You could almost flip the title, but I'll basically be seeing everything through a product lens. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's how I can always contribute to companies. Because
every CEO or managing director or whoever is in the lead of a company manages the company in a very different way. Like there isn't like a set framework for how you operate as a CEO, right? There's those that are operationally driven as CEOs. There are others who are product driven, and others who are more sales focused. You know, they are supposed to be there for the biggest clients and close the biggest deals and so on and so forth. And so the structure within the C-suite team is very much around the personality of the CEO. Like you mentioned Elon Musk, for example, he's an engineer, right? Mm-hmm. So he is an engineer-driven CEO. Like he is not the person who bothers himself with like HR issues and stuff like that, but he focuses on the engineering of the product, so to say. And so that's something I've learned in recent time as well. It's like I always thought that there was like a framework for being a CEO, but I realized that every organization is totally different. Yeah, you could just flank yourself with people that have talent where you're weak. Yeah. And you can bring whatever to it. And different industries are always going to, sort of maybe lean this way or that way. But live casino is just a very, very, very difficult business. Yeah. You go into these all over the world, you've got studios running and different HR policies all around the world, and you've got to build these studios, make them run and have stable power and all the different compliance systems and the product itself. So like you really kind of have to be an octopus if you're running Evolution in this case. Yeah. And so Martin is everywhere. He's everywhere all at once, and I don't want that job. It's not for everyone, that's for sure. Yeah. In the last podcast that we did, when I said like a year and a half ago almost, so like 15 months ago, something like that, I asked you a question that you couldn't answer, which is unlike Todd Haushalter. And that was the question, what can disrupt Evolution? And now, 15 months later, obviously the Q1 results were extremely strong. You have proven an ability to face adversity and still being able to report incredible numbers. But do you have an answer now? Like, what do you think could disrupt Evolution? Like not the obvious. The pandemic could shut down the offices, for example. But at some point, a company will come from left field and potentially, come with an idea that's maybe not even the iGaming industry internally would have been able to think about. Like it could come from the crypto world or from the metaverse, push or something like that, where the trends just change in general? Like, can you make a case, do you think, for a potential disruptive event for evolution?
There's nothing. It sounds like I'm being an Evo guy here, but there's nothing in the near term that can really shake evolution, because the world is consuming everything by video. That's just where it's at. Like if you listen to like Facebook's conference call the other day, they're talking about how half of all of Instagram is video now. TikTok is a 100% video app.
Yeah.
So if you don't call it live casino, but you call it video gaming, right?
Oh, okay.
Gaming consumed on video. All of a sudden, you sort of reframe it and you think of it as like, oh wow, of course that's an indestructible trend in the near term. People aren't going to move to a less visual format in the near term. Of course, as you move longer term, I'm sort of eternally watching the idea that a metaverse, and it could be Grand Theft Auto, the metaverse could be the one Facebook's building, it could be Decentraland, it could be Sandbox, whatever, there's going to be many more. But if you have an environment where people are spending significant amounts of their digital time, it could be Netflix, and they offer gaming and at some insane scale, that could be very disruptive if they were both the supplier and the operator all at once. Now, whether Amazon wants to go through a global compliance across all the jurisdictions and be subject to all that, and who knows? But something like that, I think, would be the most. If we fast forward 20 years and you said something disrupted Evo, what was it? I'd say it would be something like that. And it would be like, there's like 2 global winners or something like that. And they are the operator, the supplier, the payment provider. They do everything or something like that. But where the way things are set up, the competitive flow, the compliance, it's just, we're a million miles from that right now.
And that's what the sentiment is in general. It's so difficult to find the case what can actually disrupt evolution, and it's an insane business. I mean, the EBITDA margins, the standing in the market. I mean, the market share that you have in live casino, the infrastructure you built up over many years. There's nothing. Like I asked Magnus Andersson this, who is one of your most famous followers. Let's say he's been covering evolution for I think the last 4 or 5 years, and he's a big believer in Evo. And he said, there isn't any comparison to the standing evolution have in this industry. Like there isn't any other company with the same margins or with the same dominance as Evo has. It's pretty remarkable.
I mean, there's even a case to be made that like if the Earth shifted from underneath us, that would even be useful for Evo, assuming that we could eyeball it and jump on it, because we can throw 500 or 1,000 developers at it. If the world changed quickly to VR, of course we're going to be there. Like we transitioned from desktop to the phone, and so it would just be a new form factor. And so something like that favors Evo. Something where there's increasingly difficult compliance. It's rough, but it favors the big. And
I think because that is the business model in a sense. On the RNG side, there is so much more competition because it's the product is just so much easier to get to market, right? Whereas like casino, the complexity is in your favor. It's more expensive to establish a live product. But the fact that it's so complex, regulatory-wise and infrastructure-wise and so on, is the reason why you are then successful. So the more complexity you add, and the more headache that is being produced through evolution, in a way, the better it is for the business.
I mean that's probably why there's not many in the live space, and it appears pretty straightforward on the surface. You put a camera in front of a roulette wheel, enter a result, and you stream it, and it's pretty easy to do that one time on a desktop. Then you get out there into the real world, and you have 10 integrations, 100 integrations, 500 integrations, and those all want to break. And then you're doing multiple currencies, multiple languages. You have a customer support team that has to block chat because that gets nasty. You have the new versions of Chrome and iOS constantly coming out that just want to break your entire system and make it fall apart. You have to throw 150 people on it to just fix bugs when the new iOS comes out. And they're not trying to make your life difficult, but that's what happens. And so if you're a small live provider, you're going to have what you're going to say is you're going to say, well, we'll optimize for like iPhone 12 and 11, but not the 10 and whatever, let alone Huawei or older Samsung phones and so on and so forth. And so you have to have hundreds of people to support and maintain all your games across all the different devices, operating systems, everything else. And video just makes life so much more difficult. Incredibly low latency video. Yeah. I push hit, I need that dealer to flip that card quickly, and I need to get it back and see it. Yeah. And if your phone rings in the middle of a hand, and you have to have code for everything. If a card goes on the floor, if there's a fire in the building in the middle of a crazy time spin, you have to have a refund tool. There's just so much there.
Can you recall like a really embarrassing situation that happened during a live? Well, like
everything has happened.
Break, so
everything has happened. Yeah, and it's sad to say, oftentimes it's captured on YouTube. You spin the wheel on Crazy Time, this exciting new game show that we're trying to get people to learn and play, and the flapper just breaks. It just breaks. And so the wheel just spins, and the dealer's sitting there, okay, now what? It just spins, and we forgot to write a policy for that one. Or, it lands in between numbers. Now, of course, we have policies for everything and all that. Or, as I'm talking to you right now, dealers are spinning the ball and it's flying out of the wheel. Yeah. We've launched games and had to pull them down because they were broken. And what even though we tested it backwards and forwards, when it was real world and it was a real load test, things broke. And that's horrible. I remember we had to pull a game and it was miserable. And I was watching it, and my WhatsApp starts to blow up, and it's like, oh my God, this is awful. Bets are being logged, this and that. And it's all the Evo people, because everybody's watching it from all parts of the company. Yeah. I'm like, pull the game. You know how hard that is? Hundreds and hundreds of operators. They've made a big launch. They've allocated resources. They've given you space on their website. Yeah. Now players are going to click on that piece of real estate on their website, and it goes to a dead link because you had to pull the game. It's hard.
It sucks.
Yeah. I mean, our friends that compete against us in live, they have the same unfortunate YouTube videos out there, and we're not the only ones. Anybody, you had Edo on the show, and he can tell you how live is, and he's an incredibly smart guy, a very capable operator. Yeah. And he understands live as well as anybody in the world, and it's a hard space.
Yeah. No, it's.
But yeah, you're right though. You're right. The harder it is, it ends up being, an accidental barrier, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Between you and the rest, you just have the resources.
Yeah, and you can never hire all the people, like the institutional knowledge that's just inside of Evolution, or inside of like Playtech or Asia Gaming. There's an institutional knowledge where you just understand every fine, subtle thing from the studio build to everything that can go wrong. And it's managing against that worst 15% of experiences, and trying to make sure that you get those down to low numbers.
For sure. I mean, Todd, we talked about this earlier. You're an ambitious guy. I mean, you have this incredible energy that you've spent in building up your name, your reputation, your knowledge base, and experience throughout the years. Now you found yourself at Evo in the last 7 years or something. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 7 years. I mean, at some point there's going to come a day where it's the last day at the Evo. I mean, if that is in 20 years or whatever it may be. I mean, there was a retail investor who wrote a column kind of analyzing evolution. And within this article, he did like a SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Mm-hmm. And under threats, one of like the only points that was mentioned is Todd Haushalter leaving the company.
No, okay.
That was like the biggest threat to evolution, right? And if you think about it, with the profile that you have and the name that you have and so on and so forth, if that day would ever come, it would signal. I mean, it would be bad news for evolution, let's say. And so I want to ask you what everyone is kind of wondering now. Like, what would it take for Todd Haushalter to leave evolution, and what does life after Evo looks like for Todd?
Well, I could probably go and work for another provider. They would probably hire me now, right? Like, yes. And they'd probably offer a lot of money or something like that. Yeah. But I have zero interest in that. Just zero. I live a pretty simple life, and at Evo, I can have the most impact on the industry because it's the biggest company, and so there's nowhere else even close. And I have slots, and I have live, and I have things in between where I'm going to bridge that gap, and do some first time things that could open up a whole new genre of gaming, and taking a couple bites at that apple. I work closely with Nick from Big Time Gaming. Other companies can't offer me that. I have insane freedom that's incredible. But it should be noted, like, I'm not some one-man show or something like that. I'm the only one that's on your show today or whatever. But there's a lot of people. I bring in ideas that are half-baked, and then those get chiseled and refined, and that's the process. And they get beat up, and they tell me, Todd, that's just a bad idea, and it's very free-flowing, and there's a very talented group of people, and it's different people for different things, and they're kind of everywhere. This might be a very unique math person that I need, or this might be design or studio design or 3D design, or it could be anything from anywhere. It could be game creation and challenging creativity. So there's a lot of people. Like it's not just me. So I'm not going anywhere in gaming. That's for sure. What would it take? Like, I love working for Martin. That's if he left and some terrible person came in and was like, yeah, Todd, we're going to create a blue ribbon commission to oversee all products, and we want you to submit your ideas to the commission, and I said, oh, that's fine. You guys have fun. I mean, I give it a shot for a minute or something, because even with a terrible CEO, it still is the vehicle where I can impact the industry or something like that. But so it would take some like blunt force thing like that, where I'm working for someone I hate or something like this. There's nothing foreseeable. And then if you go out far enough, we'll turn the page and there'll be a next chapter, and that'll be something fun, something outside of gaming though.
Yeah.
Sure.
What would it be? Like, what's your aspiration? Like, when you grow up, like, what was your vision? Like, where would you? Everyone has, I think, a vision kind of thing. Like, is there anything that?
It'll be something like where I can push on it and make an impact, an incremental impact that isn't going to naturally happen. And so, if I felt like I could create some. Like I had this dream when I was a daydream of mine is I can have a television show where you basically put people in situations where they have a chance to do the right thing. So like you have an elderly lady, she drops her purse on the ground and like money spills out, and you're filming it with the camera crew, and then people either grab it and walk off the other direction, and then you publicly shame them, as you should, or you congratulate them. And you just have a whole cycle of these on the show. And the idea is that if the show could become popular enough that you could literally have an impact on the morality of society, because people would find a wallet or whatever and they'd be like, is there cameras around here? And so putting some sort of show like that out into the universe where you could actually have an impact on the world, or politics for sure is intriguing to me. It's one of the only things that the older you get, the better you'll be at it. And so
debatable.
So I'm not
debatable.
Well, you get there's a
AOC is calling
up to a certain age that which is still a ways away. That'd be an interesting question. What's the optimal age?
For politics,
what age do you want your president to be and assume they have to deal with very serious, heavy stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's
younger.
It's older than I am now, I think. But yeah, for sure, it's a fun debate.
Yeah.
But politics is super intriguing to me. I could go into that space.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what would the policies of Todd Haushalter be as president of the United States?
Well, as president.
Yes.
Well, it's very hard to get things.
I mean, we'll regulate the online gambling first of all as the first executive order. But what would be the second?
When you actually talk about getting things done, it's very difficult in American political system, and you have to get into some boring discussion. You're like, okay, well, do I have the House and the Senate with large majorities and all this sort of stuff?
But let's take an example. Like now you have both the House and the Senate. You are very respected within your party, and politicians trust, and the people trust that you take the right decisions.
Well, we'd knock out a bunch of things that aren't even political issues. At least they're not political to me. They're not Republican, Democrat political. But so we just knocked those out. For example, I think it's ridiculous that when you go to buy a car in America, you ask, how much? 30,000, and then you start this big negotiation process. It's just predatory on those that can't negotiate well, and so like there's no reason for that. Like the way drugs are prescribed bothers me. If you look on the back of a pill bottle, and it says, okay, if you're 12 years old and above, take 2, and if you're under 12, take 1. And it's like, it's that black and white? What if your birthday's tomorrow and you're 11 years old? And then like The Rock takes the same amount of medicine as like a tiny little lady. Like because they're both old enough. Like, of course it should be more complex than this. And I realize they probably have to simplify the system for a wide population, but it's ridiculous. Yeah. Like, of course that can be improved. And I'd like knock out a bunch of these sort of non-political type issues and commonsensical type things that people could get behind. Then you could go after some bigger fish or something like that. You start with
it's clever. You start with the low-hanging fruit, get people on your side, and then you go for more controversial decisions.
Yeah, well, you need consensus. Like, you don't want to be. It's useful to have consensus and have people on your side, and I think getting some wins on the board where people are like, yeah, that's sensible.
So I think a lot about the polarization in the United States. I mean, you're American, obviously, and the American politics is something that is very interesting to me in general. And the polarization in the States between the left and the right is so far gone at this point that it's really difficult to come up with an answer of how the two parties will actually meet in the middle, rather than being more torn apart. And one of my favorite books is by Ray Dalio, and the book is basically talking about the rise and fall of empires, like what has caused the rise and fall of empires in the past. And he makes the argument, Ray Dalio, that the American empire it's at its very end at the moment. He splits up an empire and the rise and fall into basically 6 parts, where usually you have a big event like the Second World War, for example, kind of restarted the world order. And the United States emerged from the Second World War as the new superpower. And before the Second World War, it was the United Kingdom. The British pound was the world's reserve currency, and they were calling the shots, so to say. And even though the United Kingdom won the Second World War, they were so financially damaged afterwards that the pound lost its standing as the world's reserve currency, and roasted the dollar to gain that status. And the United States basically set the agenda of the world since the Second World War. And Ray Dalio is now saying that we are at the end of this cycle, and we have lived in a very peaceful time. And that's kind of all we know. So, like, in our perspective, all we know is peace, right? It's we can't comprehend what it means to be in war. And even the fact that the Ukraine-Russia war broke out, a couple of months ago now, it's now becoming a reality even to us that war can actually happen. It can actually take place in our part of the world. And Ray Dalio makes the argument that the United States is essentially heading towards either civil war or a revolution, and this will cause kind of the next part of the next chapter in the world's order, essentially. And he makes the argument that China will be the next superpower, essentially. That's his case for the very, very macroeconomics. And I guess the basis of this argument is the fact that the political divide in the United States is so extreme that, again, it's difficult to see how the two sides will actually meet again. And so my very difficult question to you is, if you were president, how would you tackle the insane political divide between the left and the right in the States that exists today? Mm-hmm. No pressure.
Let's say, how could Joe Biden do it right now?
Right.
If I was coaching him. I'd say, you've had a good career in politics. You've had a good run. Change your party to independent. Who cares? Who cares? And tell everybody to come with you. And see if you can by yourself make it the biggest party. And then that would be an incredible signal. Like, the right would warm up to him. The hardcore left would, not like it, but it would be a very interesting way to sort of eliminate or soften the divide. Like, that would be a very powerful statement that he could make, and complete eradication of his party affiliation, and then call on all members of Congress to do the same, and say, if you love your country, we are at a stage of polarization today in America, where that we need to sort of save it.
Yes.
Right? The polarization is getting to insane levels, and so if he did something like that, and then he could somehow, and it would be the biggest story in American politics in, like any reasonable time. And he used all of his energy to sort of shame people into don't stay in your party. And he really appealed to the people. And he said, call your congressman, tell them, change to independent. You're all independents, America. I talk to you guys, like all my friends, they call themselves a Democrat or they call themselves a Republican, but they're actually independent. If I go issue by issue, they're all over the place.
Yeah.
But we like our tribes, us human creatures. And so if you could try to sort of eliminate that, I think it'd be like a really big first step. And you could change the entire conversation then. Because all of a sudden, if you're a Republican, Joe Biden is less against you now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think something in that realm would get the ball rolling at least.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you got to shock the system somehow.
Yeah, and I think that's the point. As I can't remember who said this, but someone made the argument that the only way to as long as there's status quo in the world is being ripped apart, right? So slowly the world is being ripped apart as long as there's status quo, because the more comfortable we get, the bigger divides there are in society. People find their own groups, the subgroups, and so on and so forth. Society doing well leads to political divide. It leads to wealth gaps, and so on and so forth. And that's kind of what drives the polarization. And the argument that is made is the only way to unite people is by a tragedy, right? So Pearl Harbor united the United States, and it immediately entered the war. And the history is what it is. And the tragic event of 9/11 united the states, at least for a brief moment. For at least a brief moment. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And similarly now, if we look at the war in Ukraine, I don't know if you can call it a silver lining. It's probably not the right choice of word, but still, the taking all the tragedy aside in the war, the war has united the Ukrainian people in a way that was not even close to be the case before. And eventually, when the Ukrainians comes out of this conflict, the national pride they have far exceeds the political beliefs and the small issues that they are debating around. The national pride of their country is far greater than the political color, so to say. And so the argument is that as tragic as it sounds, you need a tragic event or a bad event to happen from time to time in a society for the society to come together. Otherwise, per definition, it will lead to a revolution or a civil war eventually. Is that a sentiment that you share, or do you think? Is there another way for?
It's not a guarantee.
Is there another way? Like you need a very strong leader, I guess, to change the course of.
You could come out of a war. You could come out of a war and have different factions emerge.
Yes.
And there's a lot of infighting and.
Yeah, it's not a given that after a war that the country will do great. Like you're saying, after a war, anything can happen. There's a fight for power. And obviously, there's a lot of forces at play on who's going to grab power. And there's been cases where power has been left in the wrong hands, so to say. But it is a reset button to change course, so to say. And the question is like when it's so far gone, the polarization, like in the States, like is there another way than a big event that can change that course? Like. It's difficult to see exactly how that would be, because I think in your example, if you would, Joe Biden goes out and he's the bigger man kind of thing, and he says, we shouldn't see ourselves as blue and red, we are all Americans and we should all come together. I have a feeling that the Republicans would play those cards against him. It's like I don't know how many people.
For sure, people are going to fight him and work against him and everything else. Let's like the playbook to stopping China, stopping this history that Ray Dalio talks about from playing out. What does that look like? That's a really interesting question. That'd be an interesting one that Dalio left open. Is how do you stop a late stage advanced economy from kind of going down against it? So we can theorize.
Yeah.
You need to have probably if you had a president that had some 90% approval ratings or something like that, but genuine, not because it was in a war or something like that, just actual 90% approval ratings, and this person would probably have to run as an independent or something like that, and this person was just liked and loved by all, right? Like Reagan plus JFK, something like this. And you say, well, what would they do with that? And they would have to basically go through the entirety of the United States and shake things hard. And there's no solutions, there's just trade-offs. And so you have to start making things in America again. And so you're going to have to work very closely with unions because it's an expensive place to operate. But I think also what they do is they probably create bounties or something like that, where you'd say, whoever can solve these 10 big issues, you get $10 billion or something like that. So maybe you pick a big issue like longevity. If someone can allow you to live longer, then you get whatever, 50 billion from the U.S. government, or the central things that allow you to compete better than everybody else. Yeah. And there's a strong case to be made that once there's robot workers doing all the work, that it's just going to be this wonderful world where you just wake up and you push a red button, all the robots go and they plant all the seeds, they harvest all the fields, drones take it, move it around, turn it into flour, more drones and robots cook it into pizzas, drones deliver it to your house, and you get the whole thing for pennies. And you can just kind of have whatever you want.
As long as the robots doesn't become experts in producing live slots games and the creativity within the
yeah.
Because that would be an issue, right?
Well, the use for money is going to be a lot less then. I'm sure people will still want more of it, though.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's also this sentiment that Elon Musk talks about this actually, that government comes up with a lot of processes all the time around the rules and regulation, but they never deregulate old stances that they've taken. So as we go forward, more and more regulation comes into play all the time until there is a big event. Like again, the world order changes and so on and so forth. This is also true for companies, I think, as well. You know, looking at the United States at the moment, there's so much rules and regulations and processes that it's becoming more and more difficult, and it generates more and more friction to do business.
Yeah.
And we notice this in the podcast, for example, when we speak to publicly traded companies, that I'm surprised on how open you can be when we are doing this type of podcast, and I can ask you the questions that I ask, and we can sit here and drink apple juice and water. And you know, you're representing a 20 billion USD company. Like one thing that you say wrong could have repercussions of millions. Whereas other publicly traded companies that we speak to, there's so much more red tape, and we generally don't allow, like we don't do podcasts if we can't, if I can't control the conversation. But it's quite often where like a marketing person will step in, or a PR person, and try to control the topics that we want to talk about. And then we say, no, that's not how it's going to work.
Yeah, good.
And you know, we try to take control. But it's still difficult to have these type of open conversations with someone. Like, is that something you think about in Evolution as well? The fact that you are able to move this quickly, and is it something you think about as well to not build up this library of processes that in the end of the day, like if you look at the individual process, it makes sense. But if you implement a million processes, you just basically kill all the creativity and the ability to move in the company.
Yeah. I'd say like, it's just sort of embedded into the culture at Evolution. Martin talks all the time about not being a political organization. And he's like, it's the only time really with us, like group management, where I see him get strict about something, where he's like, and if I see politics, it will not stand. And so that's something that's very important to him. And there isn't any. It's a very weird thing, because we're still a company run by human beings. So I don't know how we're not more political. I've thought a lot about this. It's slightly off from what you were talking about, but politics is the opposite of speed, right? It requires a lot of long email writing and CYA and lots of CCs to lots of people and all that sort of stuff, and it's just super unhealthy. And so, yeah, I can tell you in products, the other day, someone's like, great. I was like, this is a fantastic meeting. I really enjoyed this. And like, great. Should we make it a standing meeting? And I said, no, I'm allergic to standing meetings. But whenever you have something to report, just schedule it. And I always try to get people to schedule in increments of 15 and 45 minutes. Because everyone just defaults to 30 minutes and 60-minute meetings. And not many people listen to me on that one, but I'm on a mission to get people to schedule the 15-minute meeting. And I'll start a meeting. I'm like, all right, you got a lot of payroll in this meeting. What are we talking about? What are we gonna do that's useful that players care about? And yeah, it's like this keeping your eye on the ball thing, where you just don't allow lots of rules to get stacked on top of each other and stuff like that. But it requires trust.
Yeah.
It requires trust. Rules are in place because something bad happened, and we don't want it to happen again. And if something bad happens, you can also say, well, try not to do it again. I'll give you one. I went to Macau, and I had my phone with me, and I was testing our product to see how it worked in a far, far away place. It was like 2016. And I had a 25,000 euro phone bill.
Oh my God.
Yeah. How does that even happen? It's an Evolution phone, and it was 25,000 euros. I didn't even know that those kinds of concepts still existed. I thought those stories were from like the early cell phone days. And I was obviously running video the whole time. pounding on our games, constantly playing. Well, it was one of these weird things where I didn't get a notification on my phone that I was extremely high data usage. And like, because we're a big organization, like an email had gone and they're like, yeah, you know, this phone number has high usage. Like, oh, he's traveling with a cow, it's fine. But they didn't say how high. And then we took a fight with the phone company and you know, Martin heard about that one. He's like, obviously, don't do that again. I felt terrible. I felt miserable about it. And yeah, but like, no big rules were put in place, or we didn't overhaul our cell phone policy or anything like that.
Like,
that was
please
miserable.
don't use the phone so that it affects the EBITDA margin.
Yeah, no memo went out to all cell phone holders or anything like that. You know, we managed it through the phone company and said, hey, make sure you let us know so that we can immediately get to the employee or whatever. But it's great. Like, that happens all the time, and we're not writing new policies on top of policies on top of policies. And I've been in companies that have that. And it just equals slow. Yeah. You'd be amazed how fast we do big things in the company.
Amazing. I mean, speaking about Elon Musk and you know, he's talking about this flawed way of running a government where you just add processes and you know, you never remove them, so to say. But Elon Musk just bought Twitter, and I guess it's the most asked question in the universe at this point. But is it a good or a bad thing?
Yeah, it's a good thing.
A good thing?
Yeah.
Hot take.
Yeah. We just got finished talking about how polarized the world is.
Yes.
Right? And if you want to drive profit at Twitter, I bet you that you prioritize things that anger you. You can try to do it by putting a picture of a puppy in front of you also. So you do both. But nuanced headlines don't get you to click. And so if they need to drive more money, then they're going to put whatever it is that gets you going. And so they put stuff in front of you that angers you and me that angers me, and it pulls people. And then if you're trying to run a news organization, trying to get clicks, you need to be slightly more outrageous than the next tweeter, right? You need to be slightly more outrageous, and then slightly more outrageous, and then slightly more outrageous. And then here's the police trying to manage it all and everything else. And so if you have somebody at the top who says, yeah, I'm not driven by money, and here's our open sourced algorithms, and here's how we're going to put things in front of you, then I think you have a chance at just moving a little, the speed at which it polarizes becomes a little less. If you go on TikTok in China, you see these wonderful images of ships being launched into the oceans and buildings being built in 19 days and dams being built. And they show time-lapse videos and you know, soldiers marching in step and you know, working with great weaponry and new ships and things like that. And it's incredible. The same app in America or Europe is what we know TikTok to be, which is, you know, basically just clickbait and nothing productive or useful.
Yeah, but the question is, like, with a social media network like Twitter, Elon is talking a lot about how he wants to remove regulation. Not remove regulation. He wants to promote free speech. And you know, in my earlier days, I used to moderate forums. Right, so I remember from that time. I mean, I think like all social media networks and forums, they aspire to have free speech and let people talk about whatever they want. But under those circumstances, the minority of trolls, let's say, or the minority that have a very big voice, they tend to kind of take over the network and flood it with content that basically gets the masses to leave the platform. So 8chan is a good example of this, where in the 2000s the chat forum 4chan was born, and the idea of 4chan was that it was going to be a platform of free speech on the internet. It's very quickly devolved into chaos, essentially, and the response from 4chan was to moderate heavier, basically, the forum. That angered some of the users, and as a response, 8chan was born, which was then going to truly give free speech to its users. And that's how it's basically been living on since then. 8chan is, I mean, for anyone who knows it, it is the cesspool of the internet, essentially. And it sounds like what Elon Musk wants is the free speech, which basically 8chan's kind of rule is that any speech that is not breaking any laws is allowed. Okay, that's the simple guiding principle of 8chan. And it sounds very much that what Elon Musk wants to do is something similar, which essentially would devolve into the same chaos as 8chan. So where do you draw the line in moderation?
There's a really good product trick here. Remove anonymity. Now, again, the public company, Twitter, isn't going to do that because they would have to show an insane drop in user growth. And you have all these accounts, like I follow one, it's like Mark Twain quotes or something like that, or, you know. And so once you have total account verification, I don't think there's that much or nearly as much horrible speech on Facebook as there is on Twitter. And it's because on Facebook, there's your friends and your family and people know you and your face is on it. And you know, you're really anchored to it. And so people are really cautious about what they say, even maybe too cautious, you know, or they don't show the real version of themselves. Yeah. And that's fine. But if you just strip away anonymity, there's not a lot of people that are going to go into the town square, just like they don't go into the town square in any town and start shouting out horrible things. When it comes back to them, when it can be put into their workplace, their community. So I think removing anonymity by itself would be almost like a magic trick for Twitter.
Yeah, fair enough.
But one that they can't do today because of the...
Do you think social media should be regulated?
Yeah, well, I mean, you'll definitely be able to find areas where the size and scale of them today is so incredible that, you know, I'll take the American perspective because I understand it. So we had the Founding Fathers, First Amendment, free speech, and they didn't envision digital communication, right? And they certainly didn't envision it in the format that we have it today. And so, you know, when you have basically every single person in a country on a communication app, and if that company decides we're choosing a president, like you are severely undermining the democracy now. And there's all kinds of stuff out there already on this subject, of course, right? And from both sides think it's rigged and against them. And so I think you need to have some rails to ensure where, like election laws and things like that. So yeah, you're not going to let it run free.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting discussion point. I think as well with Elon Musk, he puts himself out there to be kind of the savior of the world, and he's going to fix Twitter. And he created a meme of himself now that like, what's Elon going to buy next? And he wrote on Twitter that he's going to buy Coca-Cola next and put cocaine back in Coca-Cola. Uh-huh. And then he wrote he's going to buy McDonald's and fix all the ice cream machines. Because there's this running joke about McDonald's that every time you go there, you ask for an ice cream, they always say that, sorry, the ice cream machine is broken.
I think if Elon was sitting here and we said, like, how much heat do you think you're going to get? He'd say, I think it's going to be a lot of heat. I'm ready for it. And then if we interviewed him in 1 year from now, he'd say, when I talked to you guys back in 2022, I had no idea. Yeah. I'm not sure I would have bought it if I knew I was going to get this much heat.
I think so.
Because like, horrible things are going to happen, right? Like someone's going to be on Twitter saying horrible things to someone, and then, you know, some horrible thing will ensue, like they'll commit suicide, and then it will be on Twitter. Probably happens every day now, but now there's going to be a face, and people will be like, Elon, and someone will be the picture of their daughter, and they'll be like, Elon's responsible because he let this speech fly. Yeah. And we begged him, and he's gonna, it's like that times every possible scenario you can fathom. And he's gonna think to himself, like, I know in my heart I'm doing something that might be useful and all that, but like, wow, I used to just be the guy that was saving the planet and ensuring that we could have life outside of this planet and solving traffic problems and solving brain problems and ensuring that AI doesn't destroy the universe. I was pretty well liked back in those days. And it's soul destroying, I think, to have, we like to be liked as human beings. It's a very important thing. And he's not immune to it. I think he's got a rough road ahead on this one.
I definitely agree with that too. I think it's going to be difficult for him to get to a place where he takes Twitter and kind of fixes all the issues. Let's say there's a reason why the social media platforms are regulated. I mean, it's not in Twitter's interest to ban Donald Trump, for example, in my opinion. Obviously, they are losing out on revenue by losing a good chunk of traffic to one of the most followed Twitter accounts in the entire product. But it's like whatever you choose, you're going to lose. Like if you ban Donald Trump, you lose. If you let him stay on the platform, you lose as well.
I think there's a pretty strong business reason for them to ban him, though, that's separate from what most people talk about.
Okay, what's that?
So they waited until after it was clear that he hadn't won the election, right? Well, they waited until after he lost the election. And so now they would say, like, oh, no, we were, we would have done it even if he was a sitting president and all this sort of stuff. But it's a pretty big bone to throw the next administration, right? He is the most formidable candidate to be the next president of the United States, right? That's sports books speaking. Yep. That's not my opinion. He's number one, Biden is number two, Kamala is number three,
right,
according to the odds.
Yeah.
And so to strip a top candidate of his bully pulpit is a real gift to the next administration. And you're constantly in their crosshairs. Jack Dorsey had been hauled in front of Congress, and everybody's putting pressure, and maybe we'll legislate them, or maybe we'll put special taxes on them. And so it's a tactical move.
Yeah, we see what.
Maybe it's why they did it, maybe it's not, but they definitely derive the benefit of that from the party that's in power right now.
Right. What else should Elon Musk buy?
Oh, a good one. What else?
So except for McDonald's, except for Coca-Cola, if he would buy Evolution or any company like that, what would he do with it? Or is there?
Well, if he wants to buy it, I'm staying on board.
Yeah, he'll take over as such. He would be the product guy in Evolution. So like stay away, Elon. Like don't get close to.
We can brainstorm.
Yeah.
What should he buy? That's a fun question. That's a fun question. He should buy companies that are basically going to help you live longer or help paraplegics walk again. We talk about crypto and we talk about NFTs and we talk about metaverse and all that, and that's cool, but it's nowhere near as powerful as health innovation. And even if you just shined a big spotlight on that space and got a lot of young engineers excited about it or young scientists excited about that space, that by itself might be its net contribution to mankind. And that's what he's all about. And so I think that'd be a really big frontier for him to do a lot more in.
Fair enough. I mean, Elon is thinking a lot about the future. And I guess that's something that you two have in common. You think a lot about what's going to happen tomorrow as well. And so to start rounding things off a little bit today, like Todd, I've known you now for some time, and we become friends. And something that you've done in the last couple of years is to predict what's going to happen in the year to come. Just as a fun exercise, right? Giving yourself accountability and dare to think a little bit left field. And so I want to ask you, what are your top predictions for 2022?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think a lot. I do. I think it's a healthy exercise to predict the future, and then tell people. I think Elon will dye his hair blue. I think that'll happen after he finally gets Twitter. He'll dye his hair blue, and that'll start a wave of everybody going into hair dyes. I think the Republicans are going to own both houses of Congress after the elections in November. I think there's going to be uprisings all throughout the Middle East. Big ones, like government overthrow type uprisings. The real cause will be food shortages and inflation. It will be talked about in the news as politically driven, and the people don't like this leader, it's a dictator, and all that sort of. That's the way it will kind of be talked about. But the real reason will be just that people's lives are shifting from underneath them, and that goes back to the war in Ukraine, because you can't get fertilizer out to the world right now, or it's so expensive you maybe only plant it a third of your farm instead of the full farm. So there's going to be a calorie shortage, and it's gonna hurt the global South, and that's going to be terrible. And they're gonna rise up, and politicians are going to lose their jobs all around the world because of inflation. And as I said, a bunch of them in America are going to lose their job. I think Kanye West is going to do something to get himself in jail. Not sure what it's going to be. Just seeing a lot of erratic behavior there. There's some fun ones for you.
Yeah, fair enough.
Evolution is going to dial in this one-stop shop where we can push all of our products through a single integration, and it's going to be incredibly powerful and usher in a whole new era for us.
What a great way to end the podcast today. Todd, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. There's only one person who I wanted to do the 100th episode with, and that is you, my friend. And so thank you so much.
Congratulations on 100.
Thank you. It's been great to get to know you over this year, and I'm looking forward to the coming years as well, if we survive this inflation crisis. And I think that we have a small little thing here from our lovely Ali and Elizabeth to commemorate this as well. So yeah, thank you so much.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
All right. Awesome.
100. Congrats. Thanks for having me. This is fantastic. I love it. My new favorite shirt.
Yep. Same. Likewise. Yeah. Thank you, guys.